Hey Bethlehem, this is Pastor Paul, and you know that we are in this sermon series called The Greats as we examine the Great Commission and the Great Commandments. And because I think within these two things we discover God's will for our lives, not only for us as individuals, but also for our church family. What is it that God wants from us? What is God's purpose for us? And so last week we took a look at the first part of the Great Commandment, found in Matthew chapter 22, starting with verse 37. Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." So Jesus is saying, in the Old Testament, this is the most important thing, to love God. To love God with our entire being. But he goes on to say, in verse 39, a second is equally important, love your neighbor as yourself. When Jesus says this is equally important, yeah, we need to focus on loving God, but you can't truly love God with your entire being without doing this, to love your neighbor as yourself. So in essence, what Jesus is doing is he's bringing these two commandments from the Old Testament together and saying this makes one commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. The two go together. So what does it look like to love your neighbor as yourself? In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, Jesus says this, "Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets." Jesus is saying the most important thing to do, what sums up all of this that you find in the Old Testament, all these laws, is to treat others the way that you want to be treated. To treat others the way that you want to be treated. So to love our neighbor as ourselves means to give to others the respect, the honor, the dignity that we want to have. To serve others the way that we want to be served. To help others the way that we want to be helped. To love others the way we want to be loved. Regardless of whether or not we receive that love, we are to give that love. So the second question here then that we have to consider is, then, well, who is my neighbor? And Jesus was asked that very question in Luke chapter 10. There was this Pharisee who said, "Jesus, who is my neighbor? Who is it that I am to love?" Because when you look at that command in the context of Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, you see it's within the context of loving your fellow Israelite. So the discussion was, well, is my neighbor only those who are descendants of Abraham? Or is it even smaller and only those who are truly faithful to the covenant? And in response, Jesus told this parable that we call the parable of the Good Samaritan. And in that parable, you find this guy who is beaten up and needs help, and a priest walks right past him, offers no help. A Levite who is going to the temple walks right past him, offers no help. And then, surprise, surprise, there's this Samaritan, this enemy of the Jewish people, who comes and he sees this guy in need of help and he helps him. And Jesus says, hey, your neighbor includes your enemy. Yeah, we are to love those who are in need of help. Those who are in need of help are our neighbors and we need to help them. But it also includes those we don't get along with. It includes those that hate us and want to harm us. It includes our enemies. So our big idea is that we are to love everyone the way we desire to be loved. We are to love everyone the way we desire to be loved. And our challenge is to show someone this week love, the love of God. So thank you for listening, Bethlehem. I hope to see you tomorrow night at midweek, starting at 6 o'clock for supper. And I hope to see you Sunday morning, starting at 9 o'clock for Sunday school, and then 10:30 for worship. Thank you, and God bless.